Morning people, let's talk about what the Bank of England raising interest rates to fight inflation means for your cost of living and especially the cost of being able to live somewhere. Because by raising interest rates, the rate at which banks charge interest on loans, they make mortgages more expensive as well, which makes it more expensive to own a house, which then makes it more expensive for people like me and probably you to rent a place. And we've seen that get worse and worse. Rental prices on sites like Rightmove have gone up between 16 and 20% in the last year, even though inflation has only been about 10%, which isn't surprising when you have landlords saying things like this.
Have you had to increase your rents at the moment? I know rates are going up, etc.
I've not had to, but the management agent I use are basically coming to me and saying, you know, we can get X amount more this year.
You didn't personally feel like you needed to, but there was an opportunity to, so you sort of took it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I haven't got mortgages on the property, so didn't have to increase the rent, but just following the market trends really.
Which is why renters are especially vulnerable because landlords can choose to pass on the extra mortgage cost to them or just take advantage of the situation to squeeze them. So the first thing the government should do is introduce rent control, limit the amount that landlords can charge on properties, because let's be clear, and you're welcome to disagree with me in the comments, but I believe that having somewhere to live is a basic human right. So I do not believe in some people owning multiple properties and using people's need for a home to fund their lifestyles. I was actually speaking to somebody recently on Hinge who said she moved out of London and back to the Midlands because she was tired of working her ass off to pay for her landlord's ski holidays. Now before I say this next bit, obviously while my law degree did cover land law, real estate is not my area of expertise, and so if there are any economists or property experts out there who want to help me out with the practicality of this or just correct me, I'd love to hear it. But as a matter of principle, until we've dealt with homelessness in the UK, the second thing the government needs to do is tax empty second homes into non-existence. If you own a property and it's not your main home and there's nobody in it for more than 3 months, it should cost you. There were 648,000 empty homes in England alone, and 225,000 of them have been empty for more than 6 months. Meanwhile, this week, the BBC reported that homelessness in London had gone up 9%. And according to homelessness charity Shelter, there are 271,000 people sleeping rough in England, 123,000 of them are children. Do you see the maths there? 225,000 long-term empty homes and 271,000 people desperately needing a home. Because the problem in this country is never that we don't have enough to go around, but that we simply choose not to spread it around. Now again, this is not my area of expertise, and I am well aware that destabilizing the housing market has historically not gone well, so anything we do would have to be done carefully. But given that my aim is to make it fiscally idiotic to have an empty second home and limit rental costs to make accommodation more affordable so everybody has a place to live, you have to convince me that the consequences of doing that are worse than 271,000 people being homeless. 271,000 human beings being on the street with no protection from the cold winter nights. And for that to happen in one of the top G7 economies on the planet, you have to argue that the harm this would do to people who own one or several properties would be worse than that. Besides, that's just a sticking plaster. The big problem is that we're not building enough houses and our population is growing. And the economists say that it needs to grow to deal with labour shortages and the ageing population. And the Tories promised to be building 300,000 homes a year by now. Instead, the Home Builders Federation says we're on track for the lowest level of house building since World War II. And this is largely because Rishi Sunak has abandoned that promise to build and is now actually bragging about the fact that they refuse to build because they say they're respecting the wishes of residents. What that means is Tory MPs are telling him not to build in their constituencies because they're worried that it might lose them votes of traditional Tory voters who don't want to see a bunch of affordable housing built next door. Now, I'm not talking about turning Stonehenge into an apartment complex or cutting down forests. If the place has environmental value, like for biodiversity because animals live there, or like the marshlands that take a lot of CO2 out of the air, then don't build there. But if it's a choice between millions of working class people having an affordable place to live and a few rich people having a nice view of the countryside, I know which one I'd choose. But there's a Brexit angle to this too, because there always is. Anything that takes £100 billion out of the economy is going to play a role in every part of the economy. Especially with yesterday's news that the government is about to delay the start of checks on imports from the EU for the 5th time. Now there's so much to say about that. For starters, the government was elected on a promise to get Brexit done, and now for the 5th time, 4 years later, they're refusing to get it done. There's the fact that this is about border controls, one of the key parts of Brexit, and they're refusing to control our borders. But the main thing is that they're delaying the full implementation of Brexit because they know it would make inflation worse. And remember, the Bank of England is raising interest rates specifically to fight inflation. And in case you forgot what Jacob Rees-Mogg said the last time they delayed the start of Brexit checks,
this would have been an act of self-harm if we'd gone ahead with it. It would have increased costs for people. If you look at small deliveries of things like cheese, you were talking about 71% increase maximum level on the retail price.
And increasing food prices by up to 71% is not going to help bring price inflation down. It's only going to make interest rates and the cost of our rent go up even more. And that's just food prices. We've already heard the Bank of England talk about the effect that Brexit is having on price inflation generally.
The simple way of thinking about what Brexit's done to the economy is that in the period that happened after the referendum, there was the very, very sort of powerful the biggest depreciation that any of the world's four major economies have seen overnight, that contributed to increasing prices, reduced wages. We think that number is about 2.6% below the trend that real wages would have been on.
Because I look at a lot of firm level data, and the small firms are the ones that are most damaged because the cost of the paperwork and so forth is a barrier. It's not just small firms in the UK who want to export, but it is also small firms in Europe who were suppliers and provided competition in the UK market. So there is an inflationary effect coming through the competition channel.
And that's with Brexit not even fully done yet. I'm genuinely curious how the Tories are going to play this. Do they start doing their Brexit checks before the election, make prices go through the roof so that Labour has to clean up the mess and they can blame them at the next election? Or do they keep delaying it, but that means going into the next election having failed to complete the promise that you made in the previous election? And for the record, nobody is saying that Brexit is the only reason that interest and mortgage rates are going up. We're saying it's one of the reasons. And most importantly, it's one of the things the government can actually control. Because the Tories could end the trade barriers with the EU and the worker shortages that are driving up prices by negotiating our way back into the EU single market, but they don't. They could control rent prices. They don't. The Tories could raise taxes on empty second homes. They don't. They could use the money from taxing second homes to build more homes. They don't. So when you watch prices rise, rents rise, mortgage rates rise, homelessness rise, just know that this is a choice being made by the Tories, knowing it'll hurt you. And know this is only happening because of our broken voting system that gives absolute power to a party that brags about defunding poor areas, despite the majority consistently voting for parties that care more about equality. So again, changing the voting system to one where all votes count equally is our way to a better UK. Have a great week.